I read recently an article written by a complete fucking nincompoop who said that my work was based entirely on Virginia Satir and Milton Erickson's work. This is, number one, not true. They were just the ones I mentioned because people knew who they were, actually, and mostly because I wanted them to know who they were. Most people knew who Virginia was, and most people had never heard of Milton. If I had 300 people in a room and I said, who's heard of Milton? There'd be like 2 crotchety old dentists that would raise their hands. We know who Milton is. He used to hypnotist. But psychotherapists, they didn't know who he was. They didn't know who he was until we started telling people who he was. Because up till that time, people didn't learn hypnosis because it was bad and it didn't exist. That was my favorite one. They kept going, Richard, oh, no, you don't want to learn hypnosis. And I'd go, yes, I do. And they go, no, you don't want to learn hypnosis. It suppresses the symptom and it'll come out somewhere else. And I'd go, cool. I want to be able to do that, don't you? And they go, no, that's bad, right? Because hypnosis doesn't exist. And I go, if it doesn't exist, how does it suppress the symptom? And they go, don't ask questions like that, please. It hurts us. We have to think. We've been taught not to. Because therapists were taught that they had to do everything they did unconsciously, or what they called intuitively. However, they weren't taught to train their intuitions. See, what I did was when I took a couple of things that Milton did that worked, a couple of things that Virginia did that worked, a couple of things that a guy named Haris Clements, who was a great therapist, but he isn't famous. He just happened to live around where I did. Because I went to all of these therapists, and I'd go in and go, I'm depressed. I feel really depressed. Have you ever been depressed? And if they went, yeah, then I'd anchor it. And go, it's like you want to get a job. Now, there were some, on the other hand, who had things that they did, and I watched them do things with people where their clients actually changed. And I had the funny idea, because everybody was trying to figure out what the right school of psychotherapy was. They'd go, well, I do TA. And I'd go, great. What else? And they'd go, I don't do anything else. It wasn't until later where people were allowed to become eclectic. You had to make a decision, and you had to hate the rest of them. It was the stupidest thing I could imagine. They spent more time arguing about what the right... See, there was one guy who believed primal scream was the right approach to psychotherapy. Now, here's the joke. Now there are still people doing primal scream psychotherapy, and the guy who invented it is selling refrigerators. I'm not making that up. He figured out it was bad for people. It fucked them up big time. When they got out of the other end of that process, they were a babbling idiot. They had to make recovery groups. They tore people apart so much that they couldn't function in the world. They couldn't keep a job. They couldn't have their families. This is not helpful to people. And they said, well, they're making more genuine lives. No, they were making no life. Now, the one thing I figured out is if something worked, and it worked on human beings, then everything that worked had to have something in common. Now, I'm a mathematician. You guys remember reduced to the lowest common denominator? All right? Everybody did that in school, but it didn't occur to people in the field of therapy. They thought that, well, my approach is the right approach, the Gestalt approach. This was the right approach. Well, any approach is the right approach. The question is, do you keep going? Do you get to results? Are you willing to be settling for blaming your clients? Because it's still going on. I cannot believe I just read in fucking Human Potential magazine, there's a guy who made up a new approach, achemical hypnotherapy. I didn't think that was new. Sounds like an old one to me. We were just talking about it upstairs. But worse than that, he says it's based on Virginia Satir and the brilliant work called NLP of Robert Dilts's. Which means the guy doesn't even read the fucking books, number one. But as he describes, and he has a trance in there, which is, by the way, so bad I can't believe it, right? The guy goes, well, maybe you'll feel this and maybe you'll feel that. Make up your fucking mind, you know? When you put people into a trance, you don't tell them maybe, you tell them get the fuck in there and do it. You know, it's like, would it be really good if your parents said to you, oh, maybe you shouldn't touch those hot coals? You know, oh, that's a sharp knife. Maybe you shouldn't stick it in the side of your head. That's not the way you learn. When you learn as human beings, you need clear and concise information, and you need it delivered that way. Well, sometimes there's a whole lot of that information, and you need to be able to hook it together. especially when it comes to being able to sequence internal responses so that you can get people to try new things. Because think of what I was faced with. I had the most schizophrenic life you could think of. I worked in the ivory tower with a bunch of intellectuals, and then I left and drove my motorcycle down into the gutter, right? And where the people down there were going like, you know, well, I'm bored, let's go rob a liquor store, what do you say? And everything in between I was really unfamiliar with. And as time has gone by, I can understand why. I have a very little patience with people who bullshit around about things. When they go, well, I really want to, but I can't. I feel like... And when I listen to people, when they go in, these people would come in, they had everything it took to have a good life. But yet, they weren't bothering to have one. Right? Now, I'm telling you, I'm sorry. I have no pity for someone like that. Because they don't need pity. What they need is someone to show them how to get inside themselves and feel good about what they have. They're not hungry. They have money. They have somebody who loves them. In fact, they have children. And they're not even being nice to their own fucking kids. Instead, they're spending all their money going to fucking therapy and whining about their fucking life. And what are people teaching them to do? Whine at empty furniture. Hallucinate dead relatives and blame them. Right? It's not bad enough because it doesn't matter whose fucking fault it is. It doesn't matter if it's your mama's fault. It doesn't matter. Nobody was more abused as a child than I was. I had almost every bone in my body broken. And it never dawned on me to spend my life looking at my childhood. As a matter of fact, it was the last thing I wanted to look at, let alone go back and relive. It's like, oh yeah, let's go back and relive the time I got the side of my head busted open. You know, are you going to go back? What is the therapist going to do? Hit me with a baseball bat again? Is that going to be helpful? I could not accept that you needed to go back and feel worse. I didn't like the idea. I had to convince people who were hung up on the idea that they couldn't know what they were doing or they would be manipulative, right? Now, that's, to me, that's dangerous. That's like driving with blinders on. I mean, here they were doing this, and they had good intentions. They were doing it because they wanted to help people. That'd be like if I wanted to help you by lining you up on the road, putting duct tape over my face, and driving as fast as I could in a car that had spikes out the front. But I had to convince these people that becoming conscious of what they were intuitive about and readjusting it. Now, in order to do that, I had to take people who were in the state of wanton and utter hesitation. Because let's...